everyone. Welcome back to Skirts and Words. And we are on location because we're fancy with my friend Trish Heinrich, who's another indie author I met at an event a few months ago. And we're going to talk about her books today. Yay! Yay! So thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming all the way up to Port Orchard. I know it's a bit of a drive.
It was fun though. It's fun
Yeah,
to
it was nice.
shoot on location and get out of the store.
Yeah, it's nice to get out.
Yep.
So tell us about your books. I have been reading the first book in your Vigilante series.
Oh, awesome.
And I'm in 1959, I think.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
So tell us a little bit about superheroes and how you got into it.
Well, I've always loved superheroes since I was a little girl. And I always assumed that you either had to make a movie or a TV show or a comic book to write about superheroes. And then I read After the Golden Age by Carrie Vaughn. And I was like, oh my God, you can write superhero novels. This is amazing. But then I had babies. I had 2 babies. And it was like not thinking of anything but just, having them survive to the next day.
Right.
And so it was probably, 2015, I think, NaNoWriMo, that I finally was like, I have to do something creative. So I just sat down and I had this idea for a superhero novel and I just wrote it. And I did the 50,000 words. I did way more than 50,000 words. Most of them total awful garbage. But I did it. And I just thought, well, you know what? If I can do that, what else can I do? So I started looking at indie publishing and realizing I really would love to do that. And everything just kind of snowballed from there. I decided to split the first book into 2 books because it was really long. And the first book, Serpent Sacrifice, which you can see the cover poster right above me. It's still pretty long. For a superhero novel, it is kind of epic fantasy length. But every book I learned a little bit more about the story I wanted to tell and the people I wanted to tell. And the book is set in the past, but it's an alternate Earth past. So it's the city names are different, kind of like how DC Comics does the world. So like you said, 1959, that's kind of when things get really moving in the book. And the rest of the trilogy takes place in the early 60s. And then I just launched last week a new series in that universe that is set in the early 1960s again, but it's my first Black protagonist, my first lesbian protagonist. So I'm really excited about that, actually. I was a little nervous publishing and writing a character way outside my life experience, but I had some great input from sensitivity readers and friends, and so it's been a very big whirlwind journey, actually.
That's awesome. And you, I think from when I talked to you before, you were in acting before. Was writing something that you did alongside of acting, or how did you transition from acting to writing?
So when I was really little, I wrote everything. And then I was in a school play and I was like, oh my God, I want to act. And so writing took a way back seat to it. And when I was auditioning and being a professional actress, I wasn't doing a lot of writing. Sometimes my husband would bring a script to me and he would say, we're trying to write this for that, and can you take a look at it? And so I'd give him my opinion. And I did write a couple drafts of a short film script, but we ended up not doing anything with it. So it was very limited. It wasn't a lot. I really wanted to focus on trying to be a paid professional actress. And at the time, there was a very vibrant indie film community in Seattle where I was living, and also a very vibrant indie web series community. And I was heavily involved in that, and I still have a lot of friends that are involved in that. But being a mom and finding out that I would have to start over, like I had built my way up the ladder when I had my kids, had to take a break, obviously, when you have kids. And then realizing if I wanted to get back into it, I'd have to start from the bottom again. I don't know. I was like, you know what, I don't think I want to go that way anymore. And I used to love writing stories and being a storyteller, so I just decided to try to pick that back up again. You know, and it ended up still being there.
Yeah, yeah.
Is the 50s, 60s your favorite time period to write about? Or is there a reason you chose that one?
It's not my favorite, but at the time my husband was reading a lot of Silver Age comics, which are set in that time period, and I loved the weirdness of some of the stories. I was like, wait, he's whose son and uncle? Like, what? How does that work? And I loved some of just, like, we were watching Agent Carter, which is set in the early 50s. And so I was like, I love this era. I love, you know, I kind of started to love it through the lens of comic books and what had been done. And I thought,
like noir.
yeah.
Sense, yeah.
So I thought, well, why don't I go ahead and do that? Not realizing that, I mean, I have yet to come across a superhero novel that is set in the past. Most of them are present or future. I just assumed people were doing that. I had no idea. And so I went ahead and did it. And now there's all these questions I have to answer, like, am I going to have the Vietnam War? Am I going to have the Kennedy assassination?
That was my next question, because how much of the social strife and stuff going on in this particular, because it's not Earth, it's like a different, like an alternate.
Exactly.
Okay. So
like an Earth 2 or something.
So like how much social strife would be part of it, and how much would that change your characters? Have you decided?
I've decided on some of it, not others. Definitely, I have the civil rights movement in there, and that's a big part of it. It becomes a bigger part, honestly, in the last book of the Phantasm trilogy, and then the first book in what is the new series, which is the Pandora Project. I actually think I might not do the Kennedy assassination because I'm not sure how it fits in with my overall thing, but I have been considering having the Vietnam War in there in some capacity, because I think it'd be really interesting to have this question of, you have all these supers, and what would the government do if they have these people that are kind of living weapons, basically? How would the government use them? Which is a question that gets explored in the Pandora Project to a certain extent. So I've been tossing that around, but I think for me the consideration is, does it serve my overall story? And that it is kind of freeing, like having an alternate Earth, because I'm like, well, I get to kind of pick and choose, and I'm not locked in. So we'll see. I don't know. I haven't quite decided for the rest of the spin-offs, and there are going to be several series in that universe. So we'll see.
Awesome.
Is there anything? Because so what I've read, like you said, there's civil rights stuff. There's classist division and stuff. Is there anything that you have decided you absolutely are not going to touch? Like any type of topic where you just aren't going to go there?
You know, I haven't said absolutely not. I mean, I think I probably have said, I'm not going to do the Kennedy assassination. I mean, but that's not a civil right. That's not like a social topic, because I do touch on feminism too, in the sense of like she's an oddball, kind of, you know, wanting more independence and not getting married and that kind of thing. I haven't really. I don't think so. No, because I even I've been starting to consider like taking it out of the 60s, like this going into the 70s and the 80s and things like that. And thinking, okay, do I want to talk about the AIDS crisis in the 80s? And really thinking, I think I really do want to talk about that and what that was like for people. And but I think for me, it's more about, okay, how deep am I going to go in there? Because it's a superhero novel, it's fantasy, it's science fiction, you know, and so it can't be all about the social commentary. But I feel like superheroes have always talked about social issues. They've always been this lens that we can look at right and wrong and, you know,
social justice.
And so I definitely want to do that, but I think it's a balancing act, because you don't want it to be like you're preaching manifesto, you know.
So this character of Alice, was she born out of NaNoWriMo? Or is she somebody you carried with you for a long time? Or
she was, so the original impetus for the book was a song by the nerd rock band Kirby Crackle. They are awesome. If you don't know Kirby Crackle or the Double Clicks, go look them up. They're amazing. And it's a song called Needing a Miracle, and it's basically a Superman Lois Lane character, and they're talking about how one day I won't be needed anymore, and I will be together, and I thought, God, that would make a great story. That would make a really good novel. Like, how would I do that? And I've always loved Lois Lane. Like, Margot Kidder, amazing. I love her to death. And so I thought, okay, I'll make a story where there's a girl that she doesn't have superpowers, but she grew up with two best friends that do, and we'll just see what happens. And originally, Alice had no superpower, or wasn't going to be a superhero. She was going to be more like a reporter or a bookstore owner and that kind of thing. But then as I'm writing it, I'm like, no, what if she actually does become a superhero, but without powers? Like, really still making that the case. So she morphed as I wrote the book during NaNoWriMo. Who she was kind of morphed into becoming a vigilante, but she was always there as the entry point, as the hero of the story. So
nice. What else? Questions?
So I know that your main drive is superhero. Is there anything else that you write that maybe nobody else knows about?
Not yet. When I was little, I wrote Nancy Drew fanfic without knowing it was Nancy Drew fanfic because I loved her so much. I am going to write a space opera. Like, it's a spin-off of my superheroes, so kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy, but with a little like P.T. Barnum and A-Team thrown in there because I'm weird like that. And I also have a Weird West series that's kind of going around in my head, like an alternate history. What would have happened if meteors landed in the Midwest and indigenous peoples got superpowers? How would that have changed the American Indian Wars and things like that? But that's one thing that I'm like, I gotta do my research, I gotta do my homework, I want to be respectful. So I have those kinds of stories, but I think probably really sticking with science fiction and fantasy, that's really more my wheelhouse. And I thought, like, to pay the bills, why don't I just write romance novels? And then nothing against romance writers, because they work hard. That, it's not that easy. But it is one of those things where I feel like I could churn out a 50,000 word romance novel every few weeks, and that'd be fine. But then I'm like, no, I'm too picky. I'm too much of a perfectionist, and I end up wanting to throw magic in there. And I'm like, all right, well, that's not going to work. So,
what are some of your biggest influences, book-wise, in the past?
One of the major ones was Jacqueline Carey. She wrote the Kushiel series. That blew my mind. The beauty of the language and the poetry, and how the world was really a character that you got to know alongside the people. And it was just, it was amazing. It was beautiful. Guy Kay was the first fantasy book I ever read. And it was... My husband actually turned me onto the genre because growing up, my brother had all these Conan the Barbarian and or Conan-esque books. So, I mean, my impression of fantasy was women in chain bikinis, Right. And I'm like, but he's like, no, you have to read this. You have to read this. So he gave me Sailing to Sarantium by Guy Kay, and I was just... And for years, every other fantasy book I read was measured against that, which was probably unfair because I think it's his best duology, honestly. Those two books, and then, like I said, Carrie Vaughan's After the Golden Age, and then her sequel, Dreams of the Golden Age. They're superhero books, but it was all about the people. And it was just this assumption of, okay, here's the world, they have superheroes, and you go with it and you accept it, and you're like, okay, but it's these people and how they deal with it, and it's really character driven. And I loved how stripped down it all was. After reading all these deep, rich fantasy worlds, it just, to be able to see that and say, oh, you can have a little bit of both. Like, you can tell a good story either way. And
did you feel like there was anything lacking in the books that you were reading, like strong female characters, or did that make you want to write with strong female leads?
Well, with After the Golden Age and the Kushiel series, they're centered around these amazing women. With Sailing to Sarantium, there was one that comes to mind, one female character that stood out. But the rest really that had the most agency were men.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I wasn't really aware of, women not having agency or the tropes. I kind of went along with it and with the way that I had been raised to see women and women's roles in stories. And then as I read more and as I got to know a lot of different people, and I started actually reading more feminist writings, I started recognizing a lot of the tropes. And one of the reasons that I write mainly female characters is because there weren't enough female superhero stories. You've got the token female. So in The Defenders, which I know I'm in the minority, but I love that Netflix series. You have Jessica Jones, and she's fantastic, and I love her. But that's really it as far as heroes go. And you do have some other really interesting female characters, a couple of female villains, and they're amazing, but it's like, why do we just get one and we're supposed to think that's enough?
Yeah, and be like, thank you.
Yeah.
Yay.
Oh, you're so generous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for letting us play in your sandbox.
Yeah.
I am constantly asking myself when I go to create a character, can this character be a woman? Can this character be gay or a lesbian or trans? Can they be a different race? Can they be different than me? Because what I had to do is step outside of my default, which is white, male, cis, straight, and ask those questions. And so at the very beginning, it was a very thoughtful process of when I wanted to create a character, like asking those questions and then deconstructing it, Now it's a bit more instinctual, I'm finding. When I create characters and superheroes, I find myself automatically saying, well, you know what? I think they'd be an Asian character. Yeah. I think I want, Japanese. I'm going to make a Japanese character. But then I need to really research these names and the culture and how would that be like. And I just automatically kind of go there, which is great. But it is hard to break out of what you know and where your mind, usually tends to go towards. So it's I have to be purposeful about it, I'm finding for myself. So
has that been the biggest challenge in writing? Is writing from outside of your worldview?
It's been one of, yes, absolutely. Wanting to do it with sensitivity and respectfulness and realizing I could be appropriating and I wouldn't even know it. And so going into Facebook groups or reading books by authors of color, and not just fiction but nonfiction. What is the perspective here? What's the world experience? And
have you been surprised about any of the feedback?
Yes,
yeah,
very much. The sensitivity reader that I used for Fahrenheit's Ghost, he's a very good friend. He's an actor. His name is Debbie L. Johnson. If you're watching and you do film, you should hire him. He's amazing. He's beautiful. But he read it, and we had a couple of phone calls, and I trust him. We were in acting school together, so we've been through a lot. And he talked to me. So the protagonist in Fahrenheit's Ghost, she can create fire. She can create and control fire. And he asked me, he's like, "Why'd you choose that?" And I said, "Well, I wanted a woman character to have an active power." Because that's the other thing is, if you notice, a lot of women heroes have passive mental powers. Or they can turn themselves invisible. I wanted an active, forceful power. And so he started talking to me about the African American experience of fire. And how it's not just a nice fire in a fireplace, it's cross burnings and it's your home being burnt down and lynchings. And I was like, okay, I had no idea. And I introduced her in the Phantasm trilogy. I'm like, I can't change her power. He's like, no, I don't want you to. I just want you to be aware. And it was stuff like that. It was also, we talked about the family, the African American family, and how it had been brutalized and destroyed in a lot of ways systematically over the last couple of centuries, and how it's important to have good representations of African American families. And that one note actually made me rewrite a bunch of stuff. Because the main character originally had a very horrible experience with her family. She wasn't really talking to them. And I went back and thought, how can I repair this? I can't change the fact that she's had a bad relationship that's established in a previous book, but I can write it to where there is repair going on. And that can be a powerful narrative. So there were things like that where I never would have thought of it like that. It's like, oh, this is tension, this is conflict. But looking at that tension and conflict and how it's written through the lens of the experience of people that aren't like me, it's fascinating, and I find
I'm sure
myself,
the book is better for that too, so it's not just conflict for conflict's sake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's deeper conflict. Sorry, I'm like probably talking like
no,
a blue straight.
No, it's perfect.
But it's making me like want more.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, if that's the case there, what else can I learn that would make it richer? That would make me a better storyteller.
And then
honestly.
It makes the readers learn along
exactly.
with it too.
And I've had a couple of people contact me and say, how did you know this? And I'm like, well, I read this here and I asked this person there, and it would just surprise me. It's like, does nobody do that? And not to bring judgment on anybody, because some people you just don't think about it.
Yeah.
Writing a book, you're like trying to get it out there on time. It's a stressful process.
But you have the power of people reading your words, so why not use it to further the conversation or learn something? That's what I love with books, like when people take the extra step to show and mirror back things that we want, how we want the world to be, and to learn things. I love that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Yeah, and just also to show the conflict, like within a superhero context, I think is powerful. I remember sitting in the theater watching Black Panther with my husband, and just thinking to myself, I mean, I was just blown away. And then I wanted to ask all my African American friends, I'm like, okay, what was that like for you? Like, what was that experience like? And a couple of them shook their heads. They were like, I can't even put it into words.
No.
And it's just this recognition of good representation in a hero narrative, because heroes are the closest thing that as Americans we have to mythology, and
it's definitely American mythology.
Yeah, and so to see yourself represented in a positive way within that mythology, it just there aren't words, I think, for that. Like,
well, and I think that it's kind of like a universal language, superheroes, because young boys see that, and teens see that, and men in general see that. Like, they flock to it more than like men aren't going to go flock to see Schindler's List and be like, oh, I was changed by this, but if you can put it in a narrative of a superhero and show social justice, social change, different ideas, different backgrounds, different ideologies, then I think that they're so much more responding, and have that be normalized, like different races normalized, and this normalized, and transgender, and all of that. I think that that's such a good way to bring it to more people than just like a fancy French film or something black and white or touchy-feely that a lot of people are going to be like,
yeah, so it's not their wheelhouse. They're
exactly. And I just think it normalizes a lot of conversations that are really good to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, and it brings a different perspective, I think, to people's homes. So I used to live in a very large, diverse city, and then I moved to a very small, not city, where everybody has the same. It's a factory town. Everybody or someone in their family has worked at the factory. Like every family is this little nuclear cell, and they're all in this factory town, and it's fantastic in a lot of ways. But whenever I go back to the city, I'm like, look at all the people. How fantastic. But if, when people grow up in a city, they don't know what it's like in a small town. And people who live in a small town don't know what it's like in a city. And I think that the more you can bring those things in with stories, it at least gets people thinking that maybe not everyone in the United States or the world is having exactly the same experience. Which you really have to have something prompt those thoughts. I don't think that they're natural.
No, it's not. I mean, our brains are lazy. They will default to what is easiest to understand and categorize, which is why I think, I forget what writer I heard say this, which is why I started asking the questions of, can this character be, all these different things. It might have been Jane Espenson or somebody from one of Joss Whedon's shows. But anyway, what they basically said is, we don't want to keep writing the same character. We don't consciously say, well, it has to be white guy who's cis and straight. He's like, but that's just all we know. And it really clicked with me. It was like, oh, you have to force yourself out of the way, those patterns that your brain is. You have to get uncomfortable and ask those questions. And sit with your discomfort for a couple of minutes and say, okay, why does that make me feel uncomfortable? Because that's I think where we learn. That's where we start to put ourselves, maybe not necessarily in somebody else's shoes, but we do open ourselves up to hearing from different experiences and saying, oh yeah, there are a lot of other people out there that live life differently than me. They don't have the privilege I have walking down a street or, you know, using a bathroom or whatever, you know. And it's not easy. It's uncomfortable. We like our comfort. We like easy. We like things that we just can understand. And
well, I think we've also seen people who maybe had the best intentions get destroyed on social media.
Yes.
And so everybody's kind of afraid, like, oh, I'll just not, because I'll just be quiet. Like,
I actually have an author friend that had that happen. And he had his book sensitivity read, and he asked him, he's like, I don't really deal with race. He had an African-American protagonist. Great book. And they said, oh, don't worry about it. You don't really need it. You know, you tell him the story just fine. He got just blasted for it. Oh, you're not addressing it. You're ignoring it. And he was like, he tried to engage. Like, he was like, okay, you know, I'm really sorry. Like, tell me, you know, how could I? Yeah. And it just, nobody wanted to listen.
Yeah.
And so
I think people are scared and getting burned.
It is scary. It is scary. And I was nervous because the book, I put it in the African-American science fiction category. And it's sitting there in like the top 10 of that category, which I'm like, my first emotion is thrilled. I'm like, whoa, look at that. And I'm like, oh, what if these authors feel like I'm intruding on their space? Which is something I would take very seriously, honestly. But it was a little bit of fear. I'm like, oh, I almost don't want to post about this because I don't want to be seen as the white author coming in and like taking over this space from these wonderful authors of color. I don't know what to say about that other than be open, listen, you know, do your best. I think it's all any of us can do is just try and do our best for those communities.
So are your books just ebooks, or can you get them?
They're in print.
Are they?
The Fahrenheit's Ghost isn't yet,
okay.
Because that process is a little bit longer process than ebook. But it will be at the beginning of March.
Okay.
But yeah, and also I'm looking into audiobook production for the Phantasm trilogy.
Would you read that yourself?
No.
No?
No. I don't have a studio, first of all. And also I don't have time. I would rather focus on producing new books and things like that and just hire somebody to do that. So, yeah, we'll see. I'm excited about the audiobook part of it. I'm nervous, but I am really excited about that. So,
I always wonder, like, if I write a bestseller and it becomes an audiobook, do I want to read it or do I want to hear my words from someone else?
That, you know, I did think about it. I did stop and think, okay, I could probably do this, but that's a lot of time.
Yeah.
Well, and I have been in and out of negotiations. If anybody would like to make an audiobook, I've been in and out of negotiations a few times, and I don't think authors who want to do it themselves, I don't think they realize how much of a project it is.
It is, yeah.
Because you really produce way more audio than actually makes it into the final file, and you have to edit all of that, and it's not as easy as just sitting and reading a book.
It's really not. And I am not looking forward to the process of listening to somebody read my book and like reading along with it, which is what you have to do to, you know, accept the file and know that they've done what you're supposed to do. I have a friend that he's like, that was torture. He was like, from now on I'm reading all my books out loud before submitting them. He was like, it was just terrible. So now I'm really scared. I'm like, oh God. But we'll see what happens. It's all a learning curve. Yeah. Every job I learned a little bit more.
Exactly. So what's next for you?
I am working on book 2 of the Pandora Project. And then I'm also working on a series of short stories. I'm hoping to release a short story every couple of months, every 6 weeks, right around in there.
That is impressive.
Yeah. I like short story work. It's I find it clears my head. But I'm going to be writing those about the younger, powered people that I've been introducing slowly in the books. And then I'm also outlining Fahrenheit, the one that's in the book that just was released. She's going to have her own solo series. And so I'm outlining the first book in that. because several of these books take place all at the same time. So I kind of want to know what's going on and plot them, and so I don't step on anything in any book. So
are the younger ones, are those more based towards kids and young adults, or are they still
they're probably more YA because the characters are teenagers.
Do you beta test them on your kids yet?
No, not yet. They're too violent. They really are violent. Not like grotesquely or like over the top, but there's a bit more blood and stuff than I think the girls are ready for. But
you don't want to give them ideas.
No, I really don't. They want to read them. I'm like, no, honey, this one has a serial killer in it. You wouldn't like this one very much. So that's what I'm attempting to do is release one more book at least this year, and then around 5 short stories. So
you're a busy lady.
Yes, I am. I'm trying to increase my content. It's really important to me. So
when do you write the best? Like throughout
in
the
the
day?
morning.
In the morning, yeah.
Yeah, I try to get it in the morning and then do more business stuff in the afternoon. But I'm switching that. I'm taking my Mondays and Fridays and making those solely production days. I'm gonna try it and see how it works, because I really do want to produce more content. So we'll see. I'm finding you got to kind of go with the flow. Like what worked last month isn't necessarily going to work this month. So you got to figure it all out. But
are you able to work at home, or do you need to go away?
I love working at home. I have like my ergonomic setup. When I go to a coffee shop, I feel like I'm taking over. Like I've got my keyboard and I've got my like laptop on its stand and I'm all spread out. And I do like it as a change of pace, but if I find myself needing air, I'll go and I'll walk around the waterfront and then I'll come back. So
I just get too distracted at home, like, oh, I should clean that, or oh, I should do this. So.
I have sound canceling headphones, so I don't hear the cat, I don't hear the neighbors. Like I just kind of zone in, so that does help a lot.
Yeah, I could see that. I'm ogling your bookshelves. I can't help myself.
I really need another like huge bookshelf because they're like 3 deep now. It's really ridiculous.
I had to open a store. Like I get it. And they're still spilling out everywhere.
Yep.
You can just never have enough.
No, you cannot. I totally agree with that.
Do you have a favorite of your? I know it's like picking a favorite child, but do you have a favorite book or a favorite series?
Probably the Kushiel series.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm on my 3rd copy of Kushiel Start. That one is signed, so I don't let people actually. I don't read it. I don't read that copy because I don't want it to like fall apart on me like the other 2 did. But hands down, that's probably. Well, in a close second, I would say, and I'm really surprised by this because I wasn't a fan of her Throne of Glass series. Sorry, people. But Sarah J. Maas's Court of Thorn and Roses, the 2nd book in that series, I think I've read it 4 times, and I cry every time.
Oh, that was my next question. If you're a rereader, some people, I never reread books.
It depends.
Yeah.
Very, very few. Most I don't, but there are a few that they kind of dig in, you know, and I'm like, I need to go back there. I need to go back to that world for a little while. And those 2 books seem to be the ones that I need to go back into them every once in a while. So
it's escape from reality.
Yes, but also like the emotion of it. There's something about like you feel like an author understands that you need to cry sometimes, or you just need to be sad or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's.
I always say I don't reread books, but I have reread some that I read in high school, and then I'm rereading them now as an adult and a parent, and I'm getting a totally different, completely different.
It's so weird.
It's very weird.
I almost don't want to. Like, there's some books I'm like, I don't want to read this to my girls because I loved it and I want to keep loving it. But yeah,
there's a few I'm like, these people are awful, and like they were my heroes back in the day. And I'm like, what are you doing?
I know exactly. Although the one that I was like, oh, thank God it passed, was like the Beverly Cleary books. I'm like, okay.
Those hold up.
She's still good.
Anne of Green Gables holds up.
Yes.
Babysitter's Club holds up the most part. There's a few problematic things in it.
There are graphic novels of those now.
I know, and I don't know how I feel about that. Like,
my daughter loves them.
Do they?
Oh my God.
I don't know. They were my best friends.
I loved those books.
Yeah.
Those, Sweet Valley High.
So Sweet Valley High is the one I had a problem with. I went back and I reread it.
They are very problematic.
They are.
They're
like,
really.
Jessica is such a bitch.
Yes.
She is a monster for no reason.
Yes, I know. And then there was another series about like 4 college roommates too. It was like very similar. It was like one of the friends from Sweet Valley High, and they made a series around it. And I tried reading those, and I'm like, no.
All of it. I reread 2 of the Sweet Valley High ones. One where Elizabeth goes out with an older boy and stuff, and there was just like there was so many things I was like, oh, no.
Like the guys, you're like, okay, that's stalker behavior.
Yes.
Like,
I know, and the girls are like, oh, I love it so much. Well, that's how I had that problem with Twilight. Because I was older, you know, when Twilight came out. And so I'm reading that and I'm like, oh. The only character that I could identify with in Twilight was Bella's dad. Because he was like, that boy's a creep, you stay away. And I'm like, yes, Charlotte, yes, he is a creep.
So I have like this weird split personality about those books because I read them. So my husband and I were infertile for many years. And I was having kind of a bit of a depressive moment during infertility. I was like, I just need brain junk food. Like the equivalent of Twix. So I went to the bookstore and I told the bookstore owner that, and she plunks 3 of the Twilight books down. She's like, "You're gonna want all 3." I'm like, "All right, great." I read all 3 of those in a week.
Yep.
But it was they have a uniquely like precious place in my heart. But then also on the flip side, I'm like, yeah, no, I don't want my girls reading that.
Yep.
They're not supposed. No guy that watches you sleep, like creeps into your room and watches you sleep. That is not healthy.
Yeah.
So I feel very conflicted about those books, like in a big way.
Well, and then the older I get and the more feministy I get, I guess, in my old age, or just more common sense, I guess.
Yeah.
Is what I think. But going back and rereading some children's books, because I remember as a kid reading The Giving Tree, and I'm like, oh, what a nice tree. And now I read it, I'm like, that is straight up codependent bullshit. And I will tell you why. I actually looked at somebody the other day. It was so embarrassing because I didn't mean for that to come out. But this guy came in and he was like, oh, do you have this or that? And then he's like, oh, The Giving Tree, that's one of my favorite books. And he's like, do you have that? And I'm like, no.
No, I do not.
And he's like, oh, why? And I'm like, do you want the feministy rant or do you want me to just say no? He's like, oh, no, go on the feministy rant. And I'm like, absolutely codependent bullshit. That is disgusting. Do you understand that means a woman giving up her body for everything for that ungrateful little shit?
Exactly.
Like, never mind.
No, that's exactly what, I mean, I'm reading this to one of my girls and I'm just like, why is this a classic?
It's awful.
Like, it's terrible.
It is awful.
Poor tree. And even she at the end was like, that poor tree. I'm like, I know.
Yeah, I know. The tree is unhealthy. That is an unhealthy relationship.
It's abusive.
The boy is a jerk.
Yeah.
Like, all of it. It's all gross.
It's terribly abusive.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. Yeah, absolutely.
I will, if it comes in on a trade, I will take it. But I will not order that book unless someone absolutely specifies.
There are some great, like, I still love Dr. Seuss. I know there are some problems with Dr. Seuss as a person, but I love his books. I learned how to read by reading Dr. Seuss. But then there are some modern ones like Freckle-Faced Strawberry. I don't know if you have any of those books in your shop.
Is that Judy Blume?
It's Julianne Moore.
Oh, right. Okay.
And I love Freckle-Faced Strawberry. I think those are great. Fancy Nancy. My husband couldn't stand them. He's like, she's all just material. I'm like, but it's so awesome. She's got sparkles, you know, and like she says fancy words. And my girls loved Fancy Nancy. Just so there's stuff like that where it's like, yeah, it's not deep. It's not like giving you a lesson, but
well, then sometimes I think we look for things where there aren't things because like I would read Thomas to my kids all the time, Thomas the Tank Engine, and I'm like,
Thomas is a jerk.
And I don't know if I'm searching for things, but like, is this an allegory about communism or socialism? And is no one...
That is brilliant.
Well,
like, I mean, actually...
I read it a lot. Like, I still have some of it memorized because my kids were obsessed with Thomas. You get it.
I totally get it. Unfortunately,
You're
I've been flagged where I someday...
Maybe we will have a whole narrative on the communism
someday
of Thomas.
I will have to share with you my husband's theory that Thomas the Tank Engine is about a gang syndicate.
Ooh.
He has a whole mobster theory.
You know what? I really want to hear that.
Okay.
I'm really
if nothing else,
now.
he's really bad at his job. Like, really, really bad.
Well, and, okay, propaganda can take all kinds of forms, and children's books, you get them young, right? So, there is a possibility.
Stay tuned for our next episode where we talk about Tidmouth Shed's crime syndicate and Sir Topham
and
Hatt.
Tear down your favorite childhood memories.
Yes. I have been accused of ruining people's childhoods with a couple books. So, yeah.
What are you going to do?
All right, well, we are out of time, but join us next time. We will be at Shakespeare and Company, another on-location shoot, which hopefully we will have 2 special guest stars, Mary Tyler Moore and Rhoda, the cats. And we will be talking about indie bookstores and their revival, and really in our hearts, they never went away.
That's right.
But now they're actually making money again, which I'm happy about. So join us next time. We will see you then.
Bye.
Tidmouth Shed's crime syndicate.